All righty. Hey. Hey, there we are. Got to make sure Mr. Microphone's on. Well, hey, what a lovely crowd we have here today. Please make sure that you have your name tags on, sign in, and most importantly, turn off your cell phones. You know I hate cell phones. All right. Hey, also, clean up after yourself. That's another important thing around here. But anyway, first of all, I would like to thank everybody for coming. And a question I have for you is, do we have any new OLLI members in attendance today? If we do, would you please raise your hand? Ah, we have one. Yay, good. Well, feel free to reach out to me or anyone else around here that would be glad to help you with anything, and welcome to the OLLI family. For the rest of you, we really need you to make sure that you're doing everything you can. When you meet somebody that's new to town, please tell them about how great a program OLLI is, because we'd really like to boost our membership here. So thank you. That's my announcement from the committee that I run. All right, so we have the Alabama Bicentennial Brown Bag Lecture Series, Wednesday, September 18th. I think that's coming up real soon. And that'll be at Pebble Hill from 11:45 to 2. You can bring your lunch now, so it really is a brown bag again. And all the brown bags this semester will be in regards to the Alabama Bicentennial. This will be Alabama Folk Pottery by Joey Brackner, manager of the Alabama State Council on the Arts Folk Life Program and director of the Alabama Center for Traditional Culture. That looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And I know Bill Sherling's going to attend, because he's going to do the announcements. So really, it sounds like fun, looks like a great, and again, you can bring your lunch, so let's get out there and support this. We have the new member lunch, and guess what? You're invited. And no, you may not quit and rejoin just so you can get a free lunch. Sorry about that. And that is October 4th from 11:30 to 1 o'clock, and you have to RSVP, so call Shawnee and get yourself a free lunch. We have the OLLI Fall Showcase hosted by the membership and social committees, Thursday, October 10th from 3 to 5 at Sunny Slope. Join us for food, fun, and entertainment. I will not be doing the MC. OLLI members will bring a side dish, enough for 6 or 8. OLLI will provide the main dish, desserts, and beverages. I doubt if there'll be any liquor involved, but they will provide you beverages. And please RSVP by emailing olli@auburn.edu or call Shawnee. Well, I couldn't be happier to see that title up there. I mean, from what I hear, for some strange reason, this is not going to be a military history, but but I did see World War I, and that just makes me happy, So, but it also brings to mind one of my favorite historical quotes from this era, or phrases, I should say. And that's from Otto von Bismarck. And Otto von Bismarck is supposed to have said, "Politics are like sausage. Nobody wants to see it made, but everybody likes the result." Well, in my world, Dr. Kicklighter's lectures are like German chocolate cake. You have a rich historical cake covered by that Kicklighter's nutty humorous frosting. And with that said, it is my pleasure to introduce, for a brand new class, the one and only OLLI's favorite master baker, Dr. Joseph Kicklighter.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you and welcome to OLLI, at least my part of it. I believe there are people who are new, and I want to assure both returning members and new participants that you are entitled and will receive a break. You get the break. regardless of what I think about it, you will get it. There will be cameras in the ladies' and men's room to check to make sure that you return. So don't try to run out. As has been, that is one hope of escape, but there is only one way. I'm delighted to be doing this because this is new for me. It's like how you spent your summer vacation. I did preparing this class. It is a year class, believe it or not, just to cover 20 years. But what a 20 years they were. As we know, some of us were born then. And so 1919 to 1939 were very eventful in our history. I do offer you, in case you would like to read about it, and it includes pictures. So for those who get easily bored with print, this is one of those books from the 70s, and rightly called A Broken World, that covers this period in a great deal of detail in areas like military history or other areas such as scientific history. Let's not forget Einstein. In case you want to do the history of physics, you are more than welcome to do that. But there are some lovely pictures. It's from the Langer series of history, and it came out in the late 60s, early 70s, and I got it on Amazon for $1.50.
Two great fellows there.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, this is to give you excitement of Hitler and Mussolini, because they are obviously going to be discussed quite a bit as we move forward in this class. As many of you know, my trade is the Middle Ages, but I thought maybe I could expand a little bit since this was my minor field in school. So I thought, well, I know a little something about it, so let's see if we can't share and see how much of this that I can remind you of. Because although most of us were not alive at this time, we have heard about it from parents or grandparents, and we know there were some good times and bad times. I was trying to think of something good. Well, there's independence for Ireland. That's good. And we think of the birth of Czechoslovakia. That's good. So I've got that covered, that area of, those are two good things. Are there some rather unpleasant things? Well, I think the world wars will do nicely. I think the Great Depression will cover it. The big three right there. But to get to all of that, we first of all have to get some grounding in how much the world changed. Because we're going today and next time to cover the world as it was before World War I. Then we're going to skip World War I because that's military history. And so I'll let someone else here tell us about tanks, planes, poison gas, and all the rest. Then I will move on to my favorite time, 1919 to 1920. And if those of you who are Woodrow Wilson fans, if there are people of that sort, then you're going to get a great treat here. In any event, we're going to start with how it was in terms of power in the course of the 19th century. And I was thinking how I could connect this to us. Most of us remember the end of the Cold War and how the maps changed. Or perhaps we even remember when we were children and Africa, the various parts of Africa were liberated and how the maps changed. Remember the great empires of Africa, and then suddenly it all became very, very different world. Well, that's the way Europe is going to be for us. And what I'm going to do is try to go through with you and talk about how those changes would work out. But remember, we are dealing with a period, the 19th century, regardless of how it comes out. They didn't know that, thank goodness. They only knew that they were in a world of great change. And it was good change. I'm sure if you would ask Queen Victoria, she would have been amazed at how her world had changed. But at the same time, people around her, her advisors, and everyone else said, this is going to lead to a better world. So as far as Europe, at least Western Europe, is concerned, all we see, or so it seemed, is positive change. Again, we kind of look today at some of the ills of industrialization and urbanization, maybe romanticize the country life and milking the cows and so forth. But in fact, we understand from the long perspective that creating an urban wealth, as no one less than Engels, as in Marx and Engels said, cities produce great wealth. Urbanization, industrialization produce great wealth. And from great wealth comes, well, look around you. Look at Auburn, look at museums, look at all that we've accomplished, or they have accomplished. I don't credit myself. But you understand, great wealth produces all of the wonderful things that go on. It certainly doesn't happen by itself. And we understand then that this is a society on the go. In the case of particular nations, I don't mean that it's even, but it is very impressive. You know, in 1914, 1915, people began to say, how could this have happened? We had done so much in that century. After the Napoleonic Wars, you know, the Congress of Vienna, 1815, all that way, a century of progress, of human progress, in all respects. But this is the foundation. Nationalism is fairly obvious to us, but in many ways, with the creation of Italy and Germany and the dreams of other people of having their own nation will become a greater reality and a greater danger than ever before. Perhaps we can blame the French for it and say if it hadn't been Napoleon, they wouldn't have gotten so excited about their national identity. But there you are. Nationalism at this time became associated with the doctrines of what we call liberalism, the constitutions, the bills of right, and all of the other aspects that we associate with the United States and France at this time. It was making the rounds in terms of other people hearing about it and asking, why don't we have this as well? Why don't we have a nation? Why don't we have guaranteed rights? And that sort of thing. I mean, it's very popular, and it's very thought about. In addition, and lest we forget, with wealth comes poverty. They are part and parcel of the same system. You know, it's interesting, that modern concept of poverty, because shoot, back in my day, you know, the Middle Ages, You know, we had poverty, don't you worry about it. I mean, folks didn't have a lot, but they weren't so aware of it. Isn't it amazing that as time has gone on, and we're now in the 19th century, maybe it's because the poor are more conscious of the fact that they are poor. I don't really know. I just think it's a fascinating reality. Now, of course, you could say, as the monks taught back in my day, you know, that God is going to reward those who are poor with a better life in the next world. However that may be, the poverty of this world, the unemployment, the very poor wages, all that you have it, are much more felt in the cities of the 19th century. And as a result, there is more demand for change. Unions will come about, and again, I'm rushing through this, but understand all of this takes time. And a lot of it, of course, is initially illegal. So don't you think those people who run the cities and the businesses are very fearful of any business about people organizing to get a better life? Unionization then, the unions, as we think of peaceful institutions in which people are allowed to somehow organize, is going on with the UAW right now. We understand would have been very, very controversial indeed, particularly when they are associated with views that were back then called radicalism. Radicalism always gives us a shudder, and you say, ooh, sounds pink. Yes, because, yes, you would be donned perfectly. The idea, though, of radical in this context means little d Democrat. It really does. Such shocking ideas as all men could vote, and I do mean men. Ooh, that's pretty radical. You mean, yes I do, regular folks. Let them vote. As long as you're a man, you can vote. That's considered radical. All of this democratic ideal, if you will. And that was making the rounds, legalize unions, and maybe, goodness, even improving working conditions, make a better life for all. That sort of thing. Not to make you dangerous, though, and not seize that which belongs to the wealthy class, the haves. That will, of course, come from what we bandy about now on so much. I see it so much on television. Socialism. And they talk about it all the time now, don't they? It just seems like that has become a very popular word. Socialism, though, is a product of this period. It really is. Now, earlier times, they had something called utopian socialism. I don't know if you ever heard that term. You remember that from school. Utopian socialism having to do with let's create the perfect society, and we'll all share, and today you'll do the sweeping, and I'll do the mopping, or, you know, and all of that, and we'll just all be so happy and clean. But the socialists, as in Karl Marx and so forth, had something far more broad in mind. And that is, of course, overthrowing the possessing and allowing the dispossessed to take over a society that they viewed as being totally unfair and wrong. So this is a society with a lot of, I guess you could expect this with growth and change. There's a lot of unruliness. There's a lot of excitement. And there's not a lot of people who were saying, well, this is the way it was with grandma and grandpa, and there's pie in the sky coming, so let's just all be happy. And no. I think this is a society that really expects change and really is looking for a better world. And I could not resist mentioning the juxtaposition of peace movements and war technology, because that's very big in the 19th century, believe it or not. Oh, you think that people are thinking about wars? Of course they are. They are prepared to say, oh, we hope there isn't one, but just in case there is. And then you have a year subscription to war magazines, that kind of thing. What's the latest design? Oh, yeah. This is a society of industrialization, technology. Folks are very, very excited about the possibility. Not that we want one. We love each other. Oh, we've seen bad. Wars are so bad. Oh, yes. No more wars. Pacifism. Go, Big P. And yes, there are movements. There are lots of peace movements, particularly in the late 19th century, along with movements to improve conditions for working people, movements for women's rights. There are all kinds of movements for social reform, for, I call it non-religious humanism, a sense of reaching out to other people and helping people and so forth. And part of that, of course, will be women's rights. Part of it, of course, is cutting out the booze. No more drinking, because that takes money, and that money ought to be spent on your family. And then no more people sent off to fight in senseless wars. So yes, oddly enough, we are preparing for wars, but we're also denouncing wars. There are wars between Napoleon and the Great War, but that's not our task here. But if I ask you, and I'm not going to put this on the funnel, don't worry about it. But I know, isn't that wild, even the first day? Luckily, it's non-comprehensive. So just think about that, though. What would you do if you had on a test, you'd say, name every war that occurred between 1815 and 1914. And you would be going, oh, shucks, how many would you like for me to name? Well, unless perhaps you are an expert in military history, you might not think about so many of them. You might think of the Civil War. You could think of the Crimean War. And there are others, but there is really nothing of the kind of significance with which had gone before and would occur as of 1914. But there's plenty of opportunity to test out, believe me, the new equipment that will be available. But it's very ironic, it seems to me, these two areas, peace and war. Peace activists and war technologists that are operating at very much the same time. but I guess we shouldn't be terribly surprised. Even as people were going to war by 1914, it was like there were many who were saying, I just can't believe this is happening. And it probably won't last long. Everybody will be home by Christmas. Because it was just thought the consequences of war would be so horrid that nothing could go on that long. And that's the truth. Now, where do we start? Let's first of all just give you a minute to look, because it will seem odd to most of us if we think about Europe today. There's big old Russia. Well, it's still pretty big, last time I looked. So it looks rather imposing, doesn't it? And then there's Austria, just talking about that during lunch. And you say, wow, it's so big. What happened? Did they go on a diet? They are just huge. Yeah, we'll see about that diet. And you say, but I'm missing my Poland. Well, it's not here yet. It's coming to a map near you soon. Don't worry. We're not ready for Poland. But there's good old Switzerland. No Germany. But you see Prussia. That's a hint. You don't see Italy. But you see the Pope's there. Yeah, Pope's there. Thank you very much. But no Italy. And there's the French Republic. Since it's 1852, it's Republic number 2, in case you were wondering. They're on the 5th, still on the 5th. It's a long time, 1958. So they're, I think it was about 58, 50, maybe 54. Whatever the case, France is there, and I do not want any of my Irish-American friends to be perturbed when you see Great Britain all in rose color. Because you'll say, where's my Ireland? We're not there yet. Okay? I don't mean, I just want to emphasize it's going to change. There will be change, significant change. Now, one person in the room I did not mention, and I need to get them, and that, of course, is the Ottoman Empire. Unfortunately, the map doesn't show how large that it is, but did you realize how much of southeastern Europe was part of the Ottoman Empire? The Turks had really come a long way. Northern Africa, what we call the Middle East, was huge. Broken down, but huge. So, does that look like a modern map of Europe? Well, of course not. And that is the purpose of this, is to see how all of this will change. And then World War I is going to change again. So it's like it just comes together so then it can fall apart, right? I mean, that's World War I for you. It will create these enormous changes. But I just thought it was so interesting to think about what you have up there. I mean, there's little Switzerland. Switzerland's right there. They're all comfy right there in the middle of everything. And then here's our friends up in Scandinavia. They're fine, thank you very much. But part and parcel of understanding is that nationalism, liberalism, all of these causes reach into these areas. And the question is, can anything ever remain the same after that? And the answer is no. Everything has got to change. So let's start with where we're probably most comfortable. I know that you've been to Britain many times, most of you, and some of you very recently, actually. And you say, gosh, there are a lot of Irish people here in London. And you think, what are they doing here? Well, we understand that whether they like it or not, London and Britain in general provide a lot of the jobs in that part of the world. And I couldn't resist putting that as number one issue for the British. They thought about Ireland a lot. And the Irish encouraged them to think about them a lot. Yeah. For those in military history, you probably think of Easter of 1916 and the Great Easter Rebellion of the Irish, I guess the IRA of that time. And you think, but aren't we all fighting those big bad Germans? No, not really. We're fighting against our British oppressors because we're the Irish. Many of us will remember, we may know about the IRA and all of the troubles that were part of that period. But it's interesting to be aware that this had been an issue for a long time. I want to say since Oliver Cromwell, but who knows how long the Irish had wanted to get away from those British devils. And it wasn't like, well, we want to be close and yet. No, I just think it was just pure, unadulterated hatred. And the idea of trying to say, deep inside, we love you. No, we don't. We just don't want to be part of Britain. The British tried to work this out so many different ways. You can be part of our great union of states. You can be like Canada and New Zealand said, no, we want out. We don't want anything to do with you wretches. And so it really is interesting to think, because many of us will remember. I can remember actually, I think, being on a subway and someone had left a bag or a purse on the cab, and somebody said, everybody get off, it could be IRA. Yes. I mean, it's been very exciting over the years in our trips because of the issue of Irish rights. And so, oddly, for a class on international history, I have to remind people about how much the British had to think about this and deal with it. And they would try to, well, maybe we can send Queen Victoria to Dublin and she can hang out and everybody will love her. Didn't work out. She might be Empress of India, but in Ireland, RateMyQueen.com wouldn't give her but 1 star. I don't think it was going to work out real well. The issue of suffrage and women's rights came to Britain as early as, I think it did, the United States, maybe even earlier. The movement for women's rights came about, as many of you know, in rather radical ways, because that was the only way to do it. And it included, of course, women trying to interfere in normally male activities that they could make an impression. In other words, it became a movement of note, of such great note that it's fair to say, as I was reading a book about what was going on before World War I was reading about this issue of the suffragettes Emmeline and Sylvia Pankhurst, if those names ring a bell, that this was an issue that, like Ireland, the British sat up nights and worried about. Not worried about supporting, oh, I want to give those women all the rights they want. It wasn't that. It was like, shut them down. What do we have to do? No, it was not, oh, we're sorry. Are you not happy? No, no. No more than the Irish. It's more like, how are we going to get them shut down? And that was a very important issue. Imperialism deserves a course of its own, but it's fair to say that every time you hear so many people of the world, from India to Ghana, South Africa, and all the rest, speak English, you will be aware of British imperialism. There was no empire. We'll look at maps. But there was no nation that had an empire like that of Great Britain. Whether we're talking Africa, Asia, and even North America. But even with the greatest of empires, we can have problems. And let's think 1899, shall we? And think, oh my gosh, those Boers, B-O-E-R-S. I mean, I'm sure they thought they were B-O-R-E-S, because the British did not care for those people that nowadays we call Afrikaners, I'm sure. Maybe you've met some. But the British did not care for them. Yes, they were both white, and yes, they lived in territories that should have been ruled by the Africans, but in fact, they were competing for authority in what today we call South Africa. And did the British have problems? I've heard it referred to as the British Vietnam. I'm not sure if that's right. It went on from 1899 to 1902 before the British ended it. But I think of the Boer War as just another example of what you do when you have an empire. You're constantly fighting with folks and saying, we're going to send in some peacekeepers to beat y'all up and make sure you like, and then we're going to have to get some new taxes to pay for it. You know how that is. Imperialism is very expensive. I mean, they don't say we just pick up a donation and for the peace fund. No, it's you got to send in troops and beat them up, scare them, and make sure they behave. All of that is going to be expensive. And of course, once you're in, and I don't care whether it's India, oh Lord, do you know how large India is? Just throw in Pakistan and Bangladesh, shall we? Or maybe a little Nepal on top. And then think, I wonder how much that costs. Yeah. Taxes, yeah. I mean, it's very expensive having a big empire. And you can say, well, but it's all for the best. Well, I don't know if you'd ask the people there, but the British people seem to like it. Isn't that odd? It was supposed to be a way to make people proud to be British, and they talk about the Queen's gold, silver jubilees and all the rest, and how this was the imperial pride. I mean, she hadn't been to these places. Queen wasn't going anywhere, but it was just the idea. Empress of India, they made her. All of this, the symbol of British authority and wealth and prominence, and now, well, let's face it, a lot of the people of the world speak English. for that reason. But you say, see, now, if the British had just been more concerned about Ireland instead of conquering all these folks, they would have been a lot better off. Well, that may be. I don't know. But I'm just telling you, I guess it was more fun for them, or more of an interesting project, and, well, to worry about India and other jewels of the crown. South Africa, for example. We love that one. And in fact, most of Africa, if you want to know the truth. Now, why are we trying to get the people happy? Because the people get out of control sometimes. And we call that people being poor or out of work. That's odd to think about, perhaps, but there's a lot of what we would call, I guess maybe we still have it, cyclical employment, unemployment. And what that means is that in an industrial world, sometimes you can get jobs and sometimes you can't. And you can't go and get unemployment. We're not there yet. So that's a long way off. You just do without. And so then maybe the poor unemployed person hears, did you hear what happened? This Indian army tried to fight Her Majesty's troops. Her Majesty's troops defeated them. Go big GB, Great Britain. And you're thinking, oh, well, maybe unemployment isn't so bad. I can probably get some gin, drink of choice. I can get drunk and then I won't mind being unemployed. I don't know. But some people claim that the unemployment and the bad conditions were somehow alleviated by nationalism, pride in being, well, we're British and you're not. And therefore, we rule over the world. It did not replace unions, because unions did come about in ways that seem hard to imagine nowadays, but some were more of what we would call people who have trades or talents that put them in special categories. And if you are just a general worker, you probably can't get in. In other words, you're not part of a special trained group of people. But whatever they are, those who controlled the great mills and factories were not pleased to have to deal with organized labor, believe you me. It was very inconvenient, and it was not conducive to their main interests. But they certainly had their supplies coming in of raw materials. Many of you were aware that the Civil War, the American Civil War, was very well connected to the need for cotton in Great Britain. Keep those mills running. And how this became an issue. And for many of the British leaders, it might have helped them if the Confederacy had prevailed. Interesting thought. Whatever the case, the British were number one, no question about it. Everyone recognized it, everyone accepted it. But, now here comes the international history part, but Britain, and you'll know the famous statement that she could live in splendid isolation, sounding so terribly British. We don't need anyone. Someone needs us because we're so great. That's why we're number one. But we know that Britain could not exist in an entire power vacuum. And that's why I mentioned friends and enemies. Two, I mentioned are European, and two are non-European. And you might say, but what about fill in the blank? I just thought in terms of this particular period, and I'm talking about latter 19th century and 20th century before World War I. These were the big four that the British had to think about. Number one, the French. You think, I thought that was love, amour. Oh, no, 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 no. I don't know where you read that. Think 100 Years' War, medieval people. Okay? Who are we fighting? The French, yes. But you say, times were different. Were they? France, Napoleonic France versus Britain. Yes, and yet, right across the water, there they are. It's a difficult relationship. I'll just put it that way. They have their tender moments, but they have some that are not so tender. I can remember being at a Holiday Inn in Dover, England, and looking across the English Channel and thinking, there was Calais, and I think, I was doing 100 Years War history at the time. I thought, that used to be ours. Those were good times back in the 15th century. But, yeah, you think about France is so much a part of British life. Can't live them, can't live without them, So it's not like we can ever separate, but we don't have to like them. So it's tough. The Germans, okay. What shall we say about the Germans? We're so close. Do you know the British royal family were a bunch of Germans? Yeah, never forget that. 999. Never forget it, because it's amazing to think about the connection between the British and the Germans. It is a fascinating thought. Do you know at one point the German emperor, Kaiser, was in fact related to the British king, and closely related. I mean, they hated each other, but they were closely related. Check on your Thanksgiving. I mean, there are people that you don't like. You may be kin to them. You don't have to love them, though. It is fascinating to me, though, how the relations between these two. And you say, but there's not a Germany yet, but it's coming. You better believe it's coming, and it's coming big time. Did the British know it? I think they poo-pooed the whole thing. I mean, it's like, well, we're Britain. So what if you do unite? It's nothing. I mean, you'll still be number two. I mean, Britain was on a perpetual rally. I mean, they knew they were number one, and they intended to keep it that way. Oh, and then those rebellious colonists, those Americans. Now, you talk about love-hate. Until, I guess it's Churchill and Roosevelt that give us our idea of, gosh, we just love you so much. Well, we love you. Let's just have a cup of tea and just hug each other. I don't know. I don't think it's always been like that, frankly. I think that relationship took some time to develop its warmth. But as its one-time colonist developed in the 19th century, into a massive industrialized power, the British viewed it both with pride and with alarm. So I think it's fair to say that in the years before World War I, there was a relationship that was concerning to the British, but at the same time was one of what we all say, common language, common ideals, and more in common than in opposition. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. I don't mean to imply that there weren't problems, there always are. And speaking of problems, let's think of Japan and how Japan makes our list of the top 4. Well, that in itself is an interesting problem, to find a non-European nation, state, that is not the United States, that gets to play at the highest level of world power, is a feat in and of itself. So you always have to remember that about Japan. They make the list, and they will become of great concern to Britain, because Japan is an island, and so is Britain. And that will be an important beginning for their relationship. Now, for those who are new to Ollie, you are now permitted a short break.
I said, why would somebody even want to look at my email or whatever? Why did I have to put the stupid code on my phone?
3.5 minutes. Okay. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Japan. We are just thinking now, finally, about the Japanese as well as Americans as being of particular interest to the British Foreign Office. And if I say Britain and China, and I say Hong Kong, many of you will, of course, understand why Japan, as well as the other powers, will be so important for Great Britain. Great Britain has great imperial interests, and in China, as well as the British, the Japanese, and Americans and others have vital interests. For a long time then, the British will decide, the Japanese, I guess as we would say today, are a keeper. Let us be friends with the Japanese, and so they were, as we're going to see in this course, up through the 1920s, which I find very, very interesting for many reasons. And then let us go to the Third Republic. We had just that one little mention of the Second Republic, and I would like to dawdle over that, but we don't have the time. Because the Second Republic would fall because one of the candidates for president decided he wanted to be more than that. His last name was Bonaparte. And yes, I mean